We're studying today the Jews and their journey. They landed in Egypt for a while. Moses came and rescued them and took them on a wild journey, the length of which is barely the distance from one side of our state to the other, but it took them quite a few years to make that trip. Joshua comes in next and begins to tell us about conquering the area. Up to this point, we've been concerned about getting them there. They're there now, and Joshua is going to tell us all the things that they had to do in order to accomplish their objective. Moses is no longer the leader, but that had been turned over to a very capable Joshua. And for the next few weeks, we're going to cover Joshua, Judges, and my favorite book, Ruth, because my grandmother's name was Ruth. This is Palestine after the time of the Jews and the conquering of it with Moses. Look at it. See how big it is? It occupied a relatively large area of the livable, fertile land in the Middle East. The areas to the north, the south, the east were fairly much desert, and it was quite expansive after Moses and the Israelites captured all of the land. But over time, Israel has faded. What does it look like today? Percentage-wise, what do you think? We know it's less. You think it's 10%, 25, 30, 50? My grandson has an answer. How much? 25%. That's only because he went over the lesson with me earlier, folks. I hate to admit that, but I don't want to take it away from him. He did remember it though, right? 25%. That's right. And just as my grandson said, this is what it looks like today. That's what it could have been. It should have been. Perhaps even more than that by today. That's what it looks like today. Only 25%. 2,000 square miles. Who wrote Joshua? It'd be interesting if anybody else other than Joshua wrote it, right? When was it written? Was it written early in his life, in the middle part of his life, late in life? You know, a lot of people will tell you that it was written by many authors, not just one. The earliest chapters were chapters 2 through 11. And at that time, the time of King Josiah, these 10 chapters may have been all that there were to this book. Josiah demanded that his historians complete the book and bring it up to date, but this work would not be finished until after the Jews returned from captivity. The chapters divide pretty clearly. Chapter 1 is all about God's commissioning of Joshua to take the leadership position after Moses. Then there's a telling of the Jews' entry into Canaan, the wars they fought to wrestle control over the region. And then chapters 13 through 22 tell us of all the decisions that had to be made when they were dividing the land between all those different families who had come to take over that land. And then the last two chapters are sad chapters because it tells Joshua's farewell message, the message that he has to the Jews. Now, near the end of Moses' life, he chose Joshua, of course, to lead the people. He was very well trained and he was very ready for the job. God promised him some things that probably gave him courage all through his career. At the very beginning, God promised Joshua that he would be wealthy and successful. If God came to you and told you you're going to be wealthy and successful and it didn't happen right away, would you be disappointed? Would you give up on it? Chances are, over time, you might. Joshua didn't. He held on to that notion that he would be successful because his God told him he would be. And God also told him, you have to continue the legacy that Moses left behind, and you will be blessed when you do that. So Joshua told the people, Moses is not there anymore. Joshua told them, in 3 days, we're going to leave, and we're going to take over our new homeland. And the first thing we'll have to do is cross the Jordan. But don't worry about that. God has promised you the land. That land is as good as your land today. It's your land. Let's move over into it. 3 of the tribes decided not to go over. They didn't go with the Jews when they went over. They decided to live on that side of the divide, which would have been the Jordan River. They lived on the eastern side of the Jordan River. But Moses made them promise that when the time came, fight him again, they would come and aid their brothers in all of the wars that happened. So the tribes all began to sing praises about Joshua, their leader, and the task before him. Wherever you send us, Joshua, we will go. We know the Lord will go before us, and we will be courageous. We will be strong and victorious. Look at all that God has done for us. Surely he'll be with us. Joshua must have felt like the football coach feels at the very beginning of the season. Coach, we're with you. We're going to do what you tell us to do. We've practiced hard. We're going to follow through and do it, and we know we're going to be victorious. So much courage, swagger, and bravado. How much do you know about the area of Palestine? You know a lot about it? A little bit about it? About this much, like me? About this much about it? In 2009, the BBC News prepared a pictorial view of the land of Israel from top to bottom. And I found it very interesting. So we'll take a quick walk through the land as it exists today, and you should have a better appreciation for the idea of what Palestine and all the areas above and below it represent today. We're going to take a journey down the Jordan River. If you've never been there, I've got some pictures that will probably surprise you. The Jordan River starts out on top of a tall mountain, Mount Hermon. It's a river that has a fairly steep descent. It is not just your lazy flowing river. It has a pretty rapid descent all the way down until it hits below sea level. The Jews would have pronounced it Yarden, the Yarden River. Not the Jordan River, but the Yarden River. And that word, incidentally, in their language, means to go down a steep hill. This river went down a steep hill. It starts about 9,000 feet above sea level, and it descends to about 200 feet below sea level. 10,000 feet of fall in a relatively short distance. How long is 10,000 feet? It's about 2 miles. It's about 2 miles. There are 5,280 feet in a mile, 2 miles of descent from its headwaters all the way down to the Dead Sea. Now, just below Mount Hermon in the far north, the river dumps it out into a valley called Hula Valley. Hula Valley is just a wide plain, and when the Jordan hits it, it spreads out. And it goes out, and you can see marshland that's there, and all kinds of animals live there because of the marshy environment. Now, because of the rainfall in the mountains, the river rises quickly, and the lake will too. Over time, a dam was built to make the lake more consistent in size and to control the flooding. So today, Hula Lake is a game preserve for all kinds of wild birds. That's at the very top. See, it's at the very top of Hula Valley, the very top of where the headwaters are for the Jordan River. Then we come to the Sea of Galilee. The waters that are dammed up in Hula Valley now flow down to the city of Capernaum. Capernaum will be Jesus' city. He lived on the Sea of Galilee, as did some of his disciples, his apostles, far north in Palestine. Jesus and his disciples would have crossed this about 3 times in their journeys. Now, just below the Sea of Galilee is a baptismal site. It's called the Yarden Baptismal Area. Any of you world travelers been to Yarden? You've been there, you've seen this? Wow. Were you baptized there again? It's only about that deep? Oh, you have water? Well, bring it and we'll drink it next week, okay? Oh, okay. I don't think I would, but anyway. A baptismal site. People walk down this long walkway dressed in their white robe that they're going to be baptized in, which you can purchase there at that site. You walk down and someone dips you in the water and takes you away. Or they pour water over you, depending upon what your choice would be, right? Below that, just below that, I mean just yards away from where people are being baptized in this pool of water that is now the Jordan River up there, this is what it looks like. Just on the other side of that, if you walk out in the woods and walk down the path, you'll find this sludge and this ugly brown water. You see, they don't let a lot of that water go through. Only a trickle, really. Just a trickle of water flows through there. The rest of it stays pooled up there. A small dam keeps the water at the baptismal site at a very consistent level, and only a little trickle is allowed to flow further south. So the river near this site is nasty. It's brown colored. It's filled with sludge and debris. When you see the Jordan River, you don't have this picture of the Jordan River in your mind, do you? But it's there, nasty as it can be, just on the other side of that beautiful baptismal site. Further downstream, near the border of Israel and Jordan, at a community named Peace River, are the remains of a hydroelectric plant that was built in the 1930s. That plant is no longer in use, and these two countries, Jordan and Israel, basically have been at war from 1948 to today. They're still not very friendly with each other. Further on down at the Three Bridges site, 3 bridges cross the Jordan here. Now the bridges were built by the Romans initially, the Ottomans later, and the British even after that. Old train cars from 1948 still sit on the tracks up there where the tracks used to be on top of those bridges. That site is known as Three Bridges. And the Jordan River, you can see just a little bit of it down below that. Near Aoudja Valley, which is now further on down the Jordan River, it's in the West Bank. All right, so we're coming way down the Jordan River. And near the Aoudja village, the river is about to drain into the Dead Sea, and the river provides all the water for all of the villages on the West Bank and over in Jordan. Here's a farmer who planted eggplant, but because of the shortness of water over there, his crop died early in the year, and he didn't get to bring it to sell. At times, water gets rationed here. This Jordan River is supplying water for a lot of people on either side, all the way up and down, and there's just not enough of it, really. A few miles further down, near the Gilgal, water is plentiful. And homes and settlements are nearby, but farmers continually lament on the lack of water for all of the date plants and trees that they have growing there. I can imagine a date tree would require quite a bit of water for the plum-like things that grow on them. Both sides feel, though, Israel and Palestine disagree on how they're going to allot that water, right? They never agree on much, but this is one that affects a group or community of people down there where they don't agree on it, and both sides feel like the other side is the winner, and the other side is getting more than we're getting. Nobody feels like they're really getting their fair share of the water as it flows on down. And then finally, at the very bottom, you see it empties into the Dead Sea near the top of the large Dead Sea Lake. Now, due to the receding flow of water in Jordan, at the lowest point on earth, the Dead Sea is shrinking. The sea level in the Dead Sea has dropped steadily by 3 feet every year for quite a few years now. Some restaurants that were once by the shore of the Dead Sea now are half a mile or a mile away from it. That's how low that water has sunk in this basin. At one point, the Jordan dumped 1 billion cubic centimeters of water, but now it produces only 10% of that. This beautiful Jordan River we've been talking about, 10% of what it used to be, all the way from the top to the bottom. So getting back to our story of the wanderings of the children of Israel, at this point the community is camped at the plains of Moab. Now Moab is just to the right and to the south of the Dead Sea, so they've come up around the right side of the Dead Sea, and they are at the very top of the Dead Sea. It's a pretty mountainous area on that side of the Jordan. They can climb up those mountains, Mount Moab, the community of Moab. They can climb up there, and from there they can look over and see the land that's been promised to them, the land that they want to get to. But for whatever reason, they just haven't made it there yet. At least they can get a mapping in their mind of what they're going to have to do to conquer all of that land over to the left of the Jordan River, the promised land. Now, we all know the story of Rahab and Rahab the harlot, right? I mean, we're told that story from the very beginning, and even when you don't even realize what a harlot is. You told that story as a young child, and eventually you learn that, and you think, wow, I didn't know that was in the Bible. But she was a harlot, and she owned her own home there, her house. And when the Jews sent spies in to check out the people, they wound up at her house, and she welcomed them in and said, y'all come, stay up here with me. She put them up on the roof, which was fortunate for them because at one point in their journey, they had to hide under the hay that was up there that she had on top of the house. And while staying at the hotel run by Rahab, the king of Jericho heard of the Jews' arrival, knew about the million of people that were waiting to come into this area, was deathly afraid of what was about to happen, and he knew that the spies were staying at Rahab's place. So he sent his people to arrest them. But thanks to her quick thinking, the Israelites were not captured. What happened? What did she do? If I have to tell you guys this, that's amazing. She hid them, for one thing, yeah. And then she helped them escape over the edge in a basket. Okay, she helped them escape over the edge that was there. She also, at one point, hung out a red scarlet cord. Now, what did the Israelites who were there know? What did they know about the Israelites? Well, here are some things they must have known, right? They must have known that they were a large group of people, because they could easily see the size of those people from where they were. They could look over and see. They estimated their number probably and knew it was quite a few people. They had probably heard that they crossed the Red Sea on dry ground. Can you not imagine that happening and it not be told? And they knew about the fate of the two mighty men, Og and Sihon. What's interesting about Og and Sihon? They died, right? But what's interesting about them is that they were both very tall men, presumably 14 feet tall. Quite a bit taller than me and you. Og and Sihon were great warriors, and these people, these Jews, killed Og and Sihon. Surely they would have known about that. They would have known how Israel had its way with the Amorites, the mighty men to their south and to their east. So she hid the small scouting party on the roof under some flax, and she lied to the soldiers who came investigating. And she told them they had been at her home, but they had recently fled. She really took a chance there, right? And at this point, she put a scarlet ribbon outside her window, I suppose, and let it down so that people on the outside could see it. Now, many things have followed this event had a lot to do with sacrifice, right? Pardon me. The scarlet ribbon has its traces all the way back to Genesis, and it's there all the way through Revelation. You can read about the scarlet ribbon. Many things have followed this event that had a lot to do with sacrifice. It started with Adam and Eve killing animals for their skins that they used and for food. Cain killed Abel because of blood sacrifices were accepted by God. Abraham was willing to allow his own son to be sacrificed since God wanted blood sacrifice. And along the way, the Jews had continued the practice of slaughtering innocent lambs at Passover. The end of the blood sacrifice, of course, was the death of Jesus, who died once and for all for everyone. So if you've never heard a preacher preach a scarlet ribbon, just hang on, you probably will. Somebody's going to preach about the scarlet ribbon and the thread that flows all through the Bible, the Old Testament, and even into the New Testament. Now, Rahab's house was built into the wall, apparently, on the inside, and then from this, she let down a scarlet rope and allowed the men to escape on the other side of the wall. It would have been 7 long days of waiting before the Israelite soldiers would finally arrive. She and her family knew what was about to happen. They waited in her home. They heard the Jews as they marched around the walls of the city blowing horns. The Bible tells us that as a result of her bravery and her kindness, she was commended for the faith that she demonstrated. In fact, believe it or not, she is an ancestor of a very important person. Who would that person be? Pardon? David. And by being, having David in her lineage, who would come later? Jesus. David and Jesus trace their lineage back through this woman, Rahab. She was an ancestor of Jesus. Salmon and Rahab gave Ruth to Boaz. Eventually, Boaz and Ruth came. Then there was Obed, Jesse, King David, and Jesus was a descendant of David. So he has Rahab in his history. So the time has finally come. Their first goal was to cross the river and come into Canaan. And now it was time for them to do that, to cross the river and get over into Canaan. The Israelites marched across in 3 groups. Who was the first group to cross? Would it have been the warriors, the fighters? It was the priests. The priests walked across first, and they carried the ark of the covenant, the same ark that you see in that movie. Yeah. Then 12 designated men followed, 1 from each tribe. Following them were the priests. And as the first men's feet touched the water, it began to shrink down. And eventually, the entire number of Israelites marched across on dry ground. That's a miracle. A miracle indeed for the Jordan River to split so they could cross at that point. Once they crossed into the Promised Land, they knew that for the past 40 years, no Jew had been circumcised, right? They did not circumcise the whole time they were wandering around in the wilderness. Joshua then reinstated the practice as one of the first acts when he crossed the Jordan into the land of Israel. Do you think they would have elected him president if they had known what was coming? I doubt he said that in any of the speeches he gave. At the very next day, manna stopped flowing. They didn't get it anymore. They finally made their way to the Promised Land. The city of Gilgal became the first center for them. It was the center of the Jews at the very beginning of their existence over on that side of the river. And many military exploits occurred as they tried to conquer the entire land from the north to the south. Unlike me, I finished everything I intended to say and have no more slides for you. You have any comments or questions or snotty remarks, anything like that? No? All right. Well, thank you for listening. And man, I tell you, see, I deliberately made this shorter because I haven't been getting but about 20 minutes worth of talk time, and I should have made it longer. So, all right. Thank you much, folks.